Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and for this video I'm going to be tackling one of my favourite subjects, which is the Horus Heresy. So Games Workshop have recently launched the new edition of the game with a great big box set, Saturnine, which they sent us through for review, and they have asked me if, for the launch, I would paint up an Iron Hands Praetor. Now this is a scheme that I've done a few different versions of over the years, and it's one of those really sort of, I think, quite iconic schemes from the original Black Books, that kind of oily metal look, really fun to do. And as I said, I've done it a few different times, a few different ways, but I thought it would be a fun challenge for this one to try and replicate that scheme, but without using metallics and without using clears. And I mean, if you're going to say, would you mind painting an Iron Hands Marine? Is this Farm 5? Of course I will. Let's paint. So as I mentioned in the intro, I've done a few different Iron Hands schemes, and I think my favourite to date is the one I did on Shadrach Medicine, and I'll link all these up in the top as long as I remember. If not, they're all in the Heresy playlist. But a Legion, it's, as a scheme and as a Legion and a background and all the rest of it, I just think they're fantastic. They maybe get a bit of a raw deal getting their Primarch killed so early on in the story, but it just turns them into these horrible, bitter, vengeful maniacs, really. And some of the Shattered Legions and Black Shield stuff is some of my favourite stories within the Heresy. And I always find that whenever I see an Iron Hands army, it's always quite exciting. I think people that are into them are really into them. And a few of my favourites are people like Paul's. I remember his from years ago. This was one of my favourite sort of first edition Iron Hands armies he did this lovely sort of silver grey scheme. You see it in one of the colour plates. And then there's Company of the Bitter Iron as well, which is an account I followed for years and just really enjoy their take on it. Also, I wanted to sort of have a look around, look some artwork, look at these ones that I like, and just try and figure out what sort of vibe I wanted to go for on this one. And really, I think it was simplicity and brutality was what I was going for. And that had to start with the build. So I'm going to do a little bit of kit bashing. So the kit, when you get it, it's across sort of 3 smallish sprues. It's one of those sort of long set of 3 sprues. And in the instructions, they show you how to make a couple of versions of the Saturnine armoured Praetor, but they're both the same sort of leg pose and everything. It's just sort of different arms they show you. But we'd seen in some of the articles and some of the photographs from the community teams work that you could do this different pose of the Praetor. I couldn't really understand why it's not in the instructions, but essentially all you need to do, like a lot of specialist games kits, particularly things like Titans and stuff, is you sort of nip off or cut off all these little locator lugs that help you set a pose, which is usually a really cool pose, don't get me wrong. And the nice part is by snipping them all off, you then have a much greater degree of freedom as to how you can pose them. It is a little bit tricky, I won't lie. I've built a lot of Titans for Adeptus Titanicus, built a lot of Dreadnoughts, and built quite a few large-scale Titans as well. And the best tip I can give you really, if you're trying to do sort of different poses and stuff with legs, is to make sure one of the legs is sort of well planted. So not necessarily completely vertical, but just sort of really well planted and balanced. And that will then allow you to sort of have a bit of variety with the posing on the other leg. But I just wanted to have this guy sort of moving forwards, and I wanted to make him look as heavy as possible. These Saturnine Terminator suits they're just epic. Like when we saw the leaks and then the preview images and everything, I remember Andy and I talking on one of the podcasts over on Twitch about, like, I was very excited because I thought these are something basically new. Yeah, they're a take on a very, very old thing, but they're basically new. And they're quite Marmite, I think, but I'm definitely on the side of loving them. And then I got the kit in my hand and I was like, this is just fantastic. I want to do quite a few different versions of these. So let me know down in the comments if you don't mind over the next sort of month or so, seeing a few more different takes using the Saturnine as a base kit. But obviously I wanted to change the kit up a bit, make it my own, and also theme it to be this Iron Hands character that Games Workshop had asked for. And I thought, well, you can have an axe or you can have a hammer. I kind of felt like a hammer was more Iron Handsy, but I really wanted to do the walking pose similar to what I'd seen in one of the photos, and that had the weapon in the left hand. or the left arm, and the left hand has the axe, the right hand has the hammer. So it just needed a little bit of sort of snipping and clipping and gluing and whatnot to essentially take the hand out of the one and place it into the other. I feel like they've designed the kit to, like, this wasn't that tricky to do. I remember when I made the White Scars Praetor out of the last starter box for 2nd edition, it was actually quite tricky to change the main weapon because of where the various pipes and things were located. But on this one, it was just a case of sort of cutting it and snipping it in the right places, which obviously I didn't do. Like, the very first cut I made was completely the wrong one, where I cut the back off. There's no need to cut the back off at all of the handle, but that's what I did to begin with. Consequently, it ended up being quite lucky in a way, because I just pinned it on and meant that when I was doing most of the paint job, it wasn't in the way, which was quite handy. But yeah, it's an easy little kitbash thing to do this. And we're still just using the main kit itself. And then I came to discover that I don't really own much Mechanicum or Mechanicus stuff, which was, I'm quite surprised. I bought this Iron Father Ferios, or Iron something Ferios, the Primaris, the really cool Primaris Techmarine model. I thought, oh, maybe there'll be something on him I can use. But as you can see here, the massive hammer that the dude has, it's so enormous that finding other weapons to sort of, cannibalize bits from and stuff to add on was quite tricky, because they were just too small. So in the end, I sort of cut I chose this hammerhead as well, this sort of face for the hammer, because it was a bit more like a claw hammer, a bit more brutal. And I trimmed off it's not an iron halo, but it's kind of got that look to it over the top of it. And I was going to put something different on the top, and then I thought, well, actually, I could just put a spike that was on the axe and make it more like that sort of punch dagger type thing. I thought that looked pretty brutal anyway, and it fit that whole simplicity thing, right? So I was quite pleased with that. So what I've ended up with is one of my favourite types of kit bashes, where I think it looks quite stock, what I've created, which is exactly what I want. I don't really want people to go, oh, doesn't the hammer look cool? I just want it to fit with the rest of the model. So I hunted through all my bits boxes, and I came across the Iron Hands Praetor here that you can see that I picked up a while ago when all those Praetors and consoles and stuff came out. And he has a few of these servo arm mecha dendrite tentacle things. And I thought, great, they'll work well. It's a shame the little spidery lad doesn't fit, because the half of that's moulded onto the main model. But there was 3 sort of bits in there. And then I picked up this Warsmith as well. And I was like, has he got any tentacly bits in there? And he did. So before sort of diving in, I just wanted to check that he might have some useful bits. So I won't lie, at this point the kit bash is rather expensive, but just fun, right? And they're still cool models. They'll be fine without those bits. And if you've got a bit more time, you can make your own cables and tentacles and stuff with with a comb and some green stuff, and so it works pretty well. So I needed to figure out how I could iron hands him up, basically. So I had a lot of various different sub-assemblies to put together, and to figure out if I wanted to paint them in sub-assemblies or if I just wanted to put it all together. And it also, although I had an idea in my mind of how the finished model was going to look, it was quite hard to visualize, because it's such a large model. You can't really hold the bits together, so you kind of need to build it as best you can. So he's held together with a lot of blue tack, which was frustrating. But on the rear of him, he's got these 4 ports where you can attach the cabling to, if you have one of the plasma weapons on the back of his hands. I thought they could be quite cool. I did notice as well that the plastic, the Centurion model that comes in the set, has a servo skull as well, but I just feel like servo skulls are a bit more sort of grimdark, 40k, baroque, amazing weirdness, whereas I wanted to keep him a little more, I guess, just a little bit less grotesque in that sense for the 30k one. So I stuck to the I keep calling them tentacles, but no, I stuck to these like mechadendrite type things instead, and it looked like essentially the ports were almost perfect on the back of him to plug them into. So you can see I did a few bits of pins, and then I just drilled out the ports in the back to pin the things in. It's kind of that Doc Ock look, sort of had in my head. And I love it when like a plan comes together like this. It's just, it kind of feels like it was meant to do this sort of kit bash. So I've got the resin there in a cup of very, very hot water just to soften it. And that means I can then manipulate it really, really easily, or quite easily. In the end, I just blasted it with a hairdryer. But they say the hot water thing's meant to be quite useful. One of the things I found when you're trying to do the kit bashing with resin stuff and versus plastic is you don't quite get that same crispness of hard edges on the resin. So in the end, I had to use one of my scribing tools just to sort of reshape the teeth on his little servo claw thing there, just to get it a bit sharper. And when I had the 3 on, I was like, I quite liked the asymmetry, but it wasn't quite balanced right. And I sort of talked to Andy. I said, I don't think it's quite right there, is it? And so that's where I've used the 4th one, the 4th servo thing from the Warsmith in the end. Now, normally I will pin models to corks and then pin them to the bases, but this guy, he just needed to be on his base to paint. So in the end, I've magnetised him and used him on the egg mini holder here, the Cult of Paint edition one, rather than blue tack, because he's really, really heavy. So here you can see, yeah. So this was the kit bash. So really, really happy with how this one's turned out. Yes, quite expensive, but you've still got most of those other kits to use. And the head I went for in the end is from one of the Legions Astartes upgrade sets that Forge would sell. It's kind of got a bit of a Robocop Borg type vibe, and I was just like, yes, absolutely, absolutely perfect. And a head swap is such an easy way, right, to change a miniature and make it your own. So I felt like really quite minimal kit bashing on this guy, but I felt like I now had an unquestionably, I had an Iron Hands Praetor now, or an Iron Hands character now, as a model to work from. I'd chosen all the various sort of leather terrages and skirt things and everything in the bits. You can have alternate ones which are much more cloth. I chose not to put the cloak on as well, stayed right away from cloth. And I just wanted to keep it, brutal, simple, sort of quite barbaric, and I think that sort of techno-barbarian vibe, which is what I really like about the Iron Hands. I really like that idea that a lot of them came from sort of Albia, Britain as it were. I just wanted to try and get all of that. The only thing I was in 2 minds of was whether to shave off the scroll work on the chest and put some bonding studs on there instead. I left the scroll work on in the end because I just felt like he was a Praetor, he was an important character, and actually a little bit of ornamentation, which he already had on his shins anyway. So there was, it wasn't just going to be on his chest, this scroll, there was his shins as well. So I thought, you know what, it's okay. It's okay for this, but certainly if I was to do other Terminators to go with him, I'd definitely be shaving off the chest details and sort of adding some bonding studs and things like that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the kit bash and the build part and the sort of thoughts behind the project so far. And now I guess it's time to get on with painting him up. So first up is the armour. Now, please bear with me on this one, guys. I've tried a slightly new filming setup, and the sort of first little portion of the video, the lighting is a little bit off, and I'm off camera a little bit, so I apologise for that, but it does improve as we go on, and I think I'm getting there. I prefer this darker grey in the background, so I'm just trying to tweak things at the minute to make the videos look a bit better, but there'll be a slightly shaky transition phase for a few videos. So with the armour, the whole video really is me finding my way. There's nowhere near the same degree of planning and stuff that I put into the recent Cathay project. So it's kind of falling back and relying on knowledge that I had, and just a few sort of just overarching ideas. And I say I loved that burnt oily metal scheme that the Forge World guys created. Phil Straskins and Mark Bedford, those guys created with the original sort of Black Book scheme. But I would say I wanted to do that in a different way. So all I really had to work on was, okay, it needs to be a sort of tarnished, burnt sort of iron looks, like a brown iron look, which we then introduce some different colours into. How can I do that with flat paints? Well, first off, I need to produce like a dark brown kind of iron colour. So you can see here I went in for a very simple sort of pre-highlight, but I chose to use Rakarth Flesh as my white here, which is just going to be a little bit warmer. A little bit of brown, a little bit of purple in it. Just to create that sort of slightly warmer tone. And you can see that I've done sort of very, very broad kind of highlights with it, and it looks ugly as sin at that stage. It really does. But I did a few testers, so I knew it came good in the end. And then to tarnish that colour, to create this kind of browny black, I chose to use Rattling Grime, and this was something I discovered doing Cathay. Actually, I can't think what I was doing. I was doing something on it. I thought, oh, do you know what? That colour works pretty well, because before I was like, oh, what can I filter it with, this, that, and the other. I was like, oh, Rattling Grime. And it turns out I think it works absolutely wonderfully for the job. I'm not going to bother giving you guys airbrush ratios and stuff for this. I don't generally, but the weather's been very hot here in the UK the last couple of weeks, and it's made painting quite tricky. And I've had to thin my paints a lot further. I've had to be spraying at a lot lower pressure. So typically I spray about 20 psi. I use a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in my Harder and Steenbeck Cult Paint Infinity. I'm still using the brush. I'm still exactly the same brush, but I've lowered my pressure down to about sort of 12, 15 psi, and I'm thinning my paints almost twice as much as I normally would. And it's allowing me to work, and I'm okay, but it's not ideal. But then that's the reality of things, isn't it? Is most of us, we're spraying in different environments, so we do need to adjust according to our setup. There is no sort of one size fits all when it comes to consistency and pressures, this, that, and the other. But what I would say is around about 20 psi, thin your paint 50-50, and then adjust from there according to what's happening, and also to what you want the paint to do. So once we had that nice kind of brown base to work from, I wanted to do a little bit of embellishment, but I say I want to keep it quite simple. And I thought, well, a nice little bit of white on there somewhere. And stripes are kind of a classic Heresy look on vehicles and things. And because this lad is so gigantic, there's plenty of real estate to have some fun with. So I've just put a simple stripe on his shoulder pad, and rather than just freehand it on, which to be honest would have been easier in this case, what I've done is used a piece of masking tape to set the width of the stripe. Then I've masked either side of it, then I've peeled that off to reveal that nice even width. It actually took me ages to figure out where to line it up. The shape of these shoulder pads they're just really exciting to paint, but they're quite tricky of how to orient things like stripes and decals and things off. It's figuring out which sort of edge and what angle to line things up with. But I've chosen to do white, so I've just gone Rakarth Flesh straight over the black-brown colour as my first sort of highlight, getting lighter towards the top as it curves slightly towards the light. And then I've just used Ulthuan Grey here, and I've simply used that because it was on my desk from painting the Cathay. Could use any off-white or even white, you'd be absolutely fine. So I've got that on, nice simple stripe, but much like when you put black next to stuff, it really helps the colour pop. I think, popping something like white on there as well, really just helps exaggerate those colours that we've already got into what's ostensibly a very boring coloured armour. I mean, as Andy said to me, he goes, oh, you get this done in a day, just spray it black, spray it grey, and you'll be done. And I thought, well, I'm not in any rush. I could have a bit more fun with it. Let's see if I can use a load of colours to still just make it look nice and boring. So here's what I'm going to do some oil dot filtering. So this is a technique that I absolutely love doing, and often I do on larger vehicles and things like that, but you absolutely can do it on your inventory. And as I say, this guy is massive, so there's plenty of space to enjoy and utilize this technique, in my opinion. So I've already done it to the back of the model, and I've already done it to the shoulder pad, which you can see there, or I hope you can see anyway. Really, this is a scheme that really benefits from sort of being held in the hand. So I've done my best to make sure all the shots I've got are as accurate as possible. But essentially what we do is we place small dots of different coloured oil paints over the surface, and then we're going to blend them together to create lots of different interesting sort of hues and tones, and kind of a bit of weathering as well on the model. I've chosen to use a dark brown, a red and a light green here. And all of this was influenced by, again, what the original clears scheme was, where we worked off kind of a gold, and then we sprayed greens and purples and greys over the top of it. So I was thinking, okay, right, I need to get those sort of colours in. How can I do it? So I've chosen the brown there to just keep me in that kind of warm, kind of, sort of dirty, warm colour without, I don't want it to look red. I don't want it to look green. I just want there to be little sort of hints of those colours in there. But the brown is the more dominant one. So I've put more dots of that one on there. Then plenty of the red, as you can see, and then just fewer of the green. And I find that the lighter the colour you go with oil paints, the more dominant and the stronger it is. So you tend to want to be a little bit more sparing with them. So once I've got them on the surface of the model, I'm then taking a really soft brush and I'm dipping that into mineral spirits, white spirits. I'm soaking nearly all of that spirit off the brush, and then I'm just working it up and down the plates on the model. And generally I'll try and work top to bottom, bottom to top wherever possible. Certain little areas you're just have to smush it. But that was, that's the general idea. And you'll notice we didn't need to do any varnishing or anything like that. I just sprayed the contrast paint on, left it overnight to dry, but it would be absolutely fine to do after about an hour. As long as it's nice and dry, the acrylic paint, you're absolutely fine to use oils and white spirit over the top without doing any damage whatsoever. So just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you who are on Patreon that support us there. If you jump on there at the minute, you're going to be getting a few videos from Andy also on the Heresy, where he's been working more on his Sons of Horus arm he's been doing for a few years. We love our Marines, we love our Heresy, so we're sort of both tucking in and enjoying that at the moment. But it's your guys' support that allows us to do the videos on here each week, the videos over on Patreon, the miniature competitions, producing miniatures, the podcast, Twitch is starting to build now. All of that wouldn't be possible without your guys' support. So thank you ever so much. And if for any reason you can't support us on Patreon, likes and subscribes and comments and shares, all of those things you hear people talk about on YouTube, they really do make a big difference for things like visibility. So yeah, when you're just a painting tutorial channel, those make a big difference. So I appreciate all of those as well, and feel very fortunate that I enjoy reading our comment section. You're a good lot, as is the Discord. So please feel free to jump over and have a natter with us on there. I was just showing you on the screen then that when you're doing this technique, every so often you'll want to change your little dish of mineral spirits, because as you're cleaning your brush off sort of in between the coloured dots and so on and so forth, it will start to end up getting quite murky and actually turn into an oil wash, which will end up filtering the whole surface and giving you a different look. So just every so often, just freshen it up and clear it out. So hopefully there you saw sort of 3 different demos of me doing it there on the model. Just relax, take your time. There's no rush. It's a lovely effect, and just keep working at it, and you will get there. No problem at all. Then it was time to do a little bit of decal work. So I picked up the Iron Hands one from Forge World. Amazingly, I've never owned it. I think it's 2015 or something. It said on the 2016 maybe on the sheet, maybe even older. Anyway, can't believe I've been around that long. And then picked up a few other decals which I thought might have some sort of interesting uses on the model, and then applied them. And I'll pop a link up in the top of how we do our decals. And once the decals were on, I gave the whole model a gloss coat. So I would give them a gloss coat anyway for the decals, but then I just choose to do the entire model because I'm going to do a pin wash on the model now. So another oil wash, or another oil rather, that we're going to use here. But I want this to just colour the recesses. And by spraying the model all over with gloss, and I've used polyurethane gloss there, so it's quite a tough sort of gloss varnish. It's good. It's not just a finishing varnish. It will actually, do some work for us, create like a proper shell over the model. By using that glossy varnish, and then by using a solvent-based wash like this oil is, so the oil is the paint, and then we thin it using the solvents, which is the white spirit, you create very, very little surface tension, which means that the paint just runs into the recesses really, really easily through something called capillary action. And it means that it basically doesn't stain the flat surfaces. And if it does go on the flat surfaces, it's incredibly easy to just gently remove with a cotton bud or a brush or your finger, whatever, doesn't really matter. So you want a relatively thick wash, but you want it still to be moving when you're touching it, which is what you saw me checking on that bit of sprue. So I thinned it a little further after that. Then once that's dried, and in the heat at the minute it's drying, the spirits are evaporating off really quick. And although the oil is not 100% cured, it's certainly cured enough to move on. Just give the model a nice matte varnish, so we've got a nice consistent finish across it. Now we can move on to the metals. The metals are going to be a way for me to introduce more colour into this scheme. Already, I'm already really pleased with the colours we've got. This was one of those don't muck this up kind of stages. I don't know if you ever get that with your own sort of various projects. You really, really like something and you're like, oh man, I hope I don't ruin this now. But if you've watched, anything over the last sort of certainly the last 6 months, maybe 12 months, I've just been playing around, trying out different metallics from different companies, just because I didn't want to get stuck in a rut with the metallics I used. And it's thrown up a bunch of fun recipes now that I find myself sort of, jotting down in the book and using on various things repeatedly. So I wanted to continue that really with this paint job. So I've taken Castellax bronze here and then applied a wash of Garrigax sewer, sort of a nice warm brown wash over the top of it. I do really enjoy the GW metallics on the whole. I do find, though, that they need at least a couple of coats, 2 or 3 coats, to get a nice smooth finish with most of them. And it's quite thick paint. Helpfully, I find it does thin really well with water, which not all metallics do. They'll often split out. So, yeah, and again, in the heat at the minute, it's not ideal. But, I've just got these metallics on my wet palette. I'm thinning them with water. I'm not using medium or anything. I'm finding I can get a nice sort of smooth finish with them. Which is fun. I've chosen to use a sponge to apply it to the hammer, just to create that sort of look of, sort of beaten iron, how he's made the weapon, just for a bit of variety. But it's the same colours, so it's nothing different there. And then over the silvers, I chose to use this wash mixture that I made up when I did the riser tank a few months ago now, whatever it was. Really loved that video. So just go and check it out if you fancy a sort of quite a bright tank painting video. But within it, I created this little wash, which was inspired by, in the early model masterclass books by Forge World, they used to make these washes up using various inks and gloss floor polish. And I found that with the contrasts and contrast medium in this case as well to thin it out with, you can create a very, very similar effect on a much smaller scale and a much cheaper scale, and I think it looks just as good. So that's the little mix I put up on screen that I used for that. Really like it, and I think what I'll do is go and pick up, because it's equal parts, I think I'll go and pick up 3 new pots and just make a massive batch of that up to keep. I didn't note down, by the way, that it's also equal parts contrast medium as well. You can see on the shoulder pads actually there what I was talking about, getting the smooth coat. So the ones we looked at on the right has had 2 coats of that colour, and then the one on the left had only had the one. So it is a big difference when you do it. This, can't remember the name now, it's come up on screen, but this colour I really liked. And yeah, this one I think will go in the book as a sort of future kind of look. Sorry if I sound distracted. My dog is whining to go out, but it's too warm. Oh, and then obviously I found a paint called Iron Hand Steel, so I had to use that on here. I really like using paints that have the name for what I'm painting. It really winds Andy up actually, so definitely not something we're aligned on that one. But turns out actually I think it's a really lovely first highlight over Iron Warriors. So again, I think I probably found 2 or 3 little recipes in this one that I'll be using, and I'm not going into too much detail on them, guys, because they're very simplistic, and also, yeah, like say this video is more of a rambly, exploring, having fun, kind of thing. It's projects like this that I find future things stem from, rather than this project in and of itself being sort of super important. Sadly, because of that, I tried a few things that didn't work, which was a real shame. I thought I would do some elements of the model white, like we see on a lot of the 40k Iron Hands. I really like the white gun casings and stuff. But one of the things I found with the Iron Hand scheme was you've got other black armored legions in Heresy, namely the Dark Angels and the Raven Guard. And the Raven Guard's sort of secondary colour is white, and the Dark Angel's secondary colour is kind of white checks and stuff, but also red. So I did a load of white weapons, it didn't work, and then I did the red leather and it didn't work. So I was like, oh god, now it's a Dark Angel. So in the end, I just settled on brown in the end, and it's just Rhinox hide, Thondia brown, and Steel Legion drab. It's just those 3 paints to create that brown. You'll have seen me do it in tons of videos over the last few months. It's a recipe I really enjoy using. So now it was time to get a bit of, life and interest and dirt and grime and setting into the model. So first up, I decided to do a bit of sort of oxidization or verdigris on the weird teleporty bits, or the bits I interpreted as being involved with that function of this armor. I think it's to do with like a force field and a teleportation thing, but anyway, weird, gribbly, old tech, essentially was what I was interpreting it as. So they got that sort of bronze colour, and then I've used turquoise lights, which is an oil by Abteilung 502, but again it's just a turquoise colour, and you can see I applied it as a wash to begin with, and then I applied a little bit of the paint just neat onto the surface and started pulling these streaks. I just had some different looks at various different sort of verdigris, on roofs and things like that, just to look at what what kind of patterns it made. And I just kind of tried to emulate that a little bit on these large plates on the front. And then once that was dry, I went in and did a similar job with copper oxide as well. So it's another oil paint. Then it was time just to do just a little bit of chipping. This was probably the part that took me the most goes when I was doing the test models to get how I liked it. I tried doing browny red as a chipping colour. I tried doing silver as a chipping colour. And in the end, I found that I tried doing Rakarth flesh as a chipping colour because that was the highlight colour, but it was too bright. It wasn't quite right. And in the end, sort of on my desk was sat this reddish grey by AK. And actually, it's basically just a darker Rakarth flesh. It's perfect. So I'm just going around and using my brush, doing a few little sort of tippy-tappy chips on where I think the damage would occur. Again, not too much. This project was meant to be fun. It was meant to be relaxed. There was no, it's got no job to do literally other than be a fun Iron Hands model to celebrate the launch of the new edition with. So yeah, just sort of little bits here and there to make it look cool. And then I wanted to go in and just add a touch more interest and contrast to the metallics. So I've gone in and put a highlight on all of the metallics, so just one notch brighter than what was beneath it. So colours like Runelord brass or really, really light silvers here for the silver, a coppery colour on the weird teleporty bits. And maybe if I was doing this as army painting, this was my normal, tactical marines had these elements on, maybe I wouldn't go for this final highlight. I probably would, to be honest, because it doesn't take very long. But certainly for a character model, I felt like it was worth the additional little pop that brightest kind of highlight gives you. And I particularly enjoyed the effect it gave us on the hammer when sponged on. I love how brutal and gnarly that hammerhead looks there. I think that's a really, really pleased with that. Oh, Sycorax bronze. There you go. That's the highlight colour I used on the this copper colour up here that I can't remember whatever it was. But anyway, it was on the screen. I'm sorry if I'm not particularly articulate on this one, guys. It's been very, very warm. So yeah, I'm quite proud of getting a few videos out, to be honest with you. So now a proper focal point, the face. So whilst the rest of the model I'd been fairly sort of relaxed with, and lots of texture and that kind of thing, I wanted to try and do quite a nice job with the head. I thought if I'm going to put an unhelmeted head on there, I should try and do a nice job with the skin. And that's just something I really enjoy doing is painting faces. And I thought for the Iron Hands, there's this amazing short story called Riven, which is about the Iron Hands. I would encourage you to go and read it if you haven't. It's in one of the anthologies. But basically, they're very, very sort of pale, cold skin tones on them in that story. And I just really like that. I knew there was a danger of it being a bit Raven Guardy, the pale skin and the black armor, but I felt like with all the bionics and stuff on this head, I could probably get away with it. So I just went on up to the paint rack and chose some sort of cold colours. So I went for that sort of desaturated purple, then the Thunderhawk blue, and then I've chosen Rakarth flesh as the highlight just to try and bring it back to slightly more like a quote unquote normal skin colour versus the purple or the blue. And actually, I don't think it's worked too badly. So initially, I've done the simple airbrush stage to begin with, so kind of like a zenithal, so purple all over, then blue from sort of 50, 60 degrees down, and then the Rakarth flesh from almost completely from on top. And then it was just a case of going in, putting all those paints on my wet palette, thinning them down with a load of water, and then just going in and using the guidelines that the airbrush had given me for where the light and the shadow was. To then just go in and refine those and change them slightly with the brush. It's tricky in the heat at the minute again. So that coupled with the new filming setup means sadly, I absolutely smashed the filming for the Cathay skin last week, whatever it was. But sadly I didn't quite achieve that on this one. But hopefully it's a fairly self-explanatory kind of thing. I say that it's the main thing is using that airbrush stage as your guidelines, because I think we're often taught that you paint sort of, you put a wash on it and what runs into the recesses is the shadows and what doesn't isn't. But when you look at faces and stuff, it's not quite the same as that. There's often areas of shadow and light that maybe you didn't think were there, and I'm really, really happy with it. And typically, you can't see 90% of it once it's in the model. So yeah, classic. I left his eyeball white or ivory deliberately. Definitely not because trying to put a little black pupil in there was a terrifying prospect. But I think it looks all right. Then I thought, okay, need to do a couple of these little lenses. Let's do that sort of fun, super easy, sort of lazy glowing type effect. So I've just gone in with white, and then I've gone in with striking scorpion green contrast paint here. But you could do any colour. I picked green because, again, it's a colour we often see on Iron Hand stuff. And again, I knew I had green and red in the armour, so anything I could do to call back to what I'd done to the armour. You know, the effect on the armour is very subtle, but I just love it. And then I've gone in with Tesseract Glow with a little bit of white, just to put some highlights on there. But, you know, it's literally sort of 20 seconds or so to get it, and I think it's a perfectly serviceable little sort of glow. And then it was time for proper sort of, you know, finishing touches. So I've got two oils here. I've got one called Industrial Earth at the top, and then I've got one called Dark Rust. Industrial Earth doesn't exist, the paint I'm using now anymore. It's by AK Interactive. Their new one is called Raw Umber, but it's definitely a more brown. So if you want to make it up, it's a dark sort of grey-green colour, the Industrial Earth. So by all means, you know, mix it up. That's what I'll be doing, you know, in the future when I run out of this one. But it's really not that brown. It's definitely more green. And I've thinned it down into wash, and I'm just applying it in a few places. And this I'm kind of treating as the atmospheric. So this is the dirt and the dust that's on the model. And then the dark rust, you know, any colour like a burnt sienna would work really, really well for this. And a lot of different brands will make a colour called rust. And here I'm just applying it very, very sparingly, little dots of it, and then just pressing a clean brush with some mineral spirits on, just to help that dissipate out. And generally I'm putting it over areas where I might have painted on some of that reddish grey chipping. I didn't want to just cover him in loads of streaks and this and the other. I wanted to try and be sort of tasteful and minimal with it, because that's my preference. And already the verdigris, I think, on those weird plate things on the front are already quite dominating and quite full on. So I didn't really think tons of orange streaks as well would necessarily fit with how I like my models to look. And again, I just love doing it. It's very relaxing, you know, and sort of working around the model and remembering and finding bits I haven't done. Now, once I'd got him all together like this, I felt there was something missing, and the hammer's mega brutal, so why not cover it in blood? But figuring out how on earth to place the miniature, now I have glued these fragile little servo things on him and his axe halved and all that, was tricky, to say the least. So yeah, in the end, I just about got him sort of angled how he could. I'm really sorry if you can hear the dog, by the way. She's now starting to drink to water. Oh dear. We're all struggling in the heat. She's doing all right. So all I've done is load up Blood for the Blood God, and then I'm just blowing it off with my airbrush. It takes a few goes to get the consistency right. If I hadn't been so lazy, I should really have put like a piece of paper or something to mask the rest of the model off, so that I didn't get too much of the overspray. It doesn't really bother me a bit, the overspray, but would have been tidier probably not to have had it. And that's just laziness on my half. I'd thought to do it, and then I just didn't when it came to it. I've even got like little films that are sort of papery film that's perfect for the job. But anyway, so yeah, and Blood for the Blood God's just, it's a brilliant product, isn't it, for this sort of thing. You can get more sort of realistic, I don't know what you want to call it, like different ways of doing bloods with clears and things, which I do love doing, but for simplicity and sort of impact, it's flipping great, that Blood for the Blood God. Now the base, I've done the basing just in the same way that we do in that basing video, which I'll link up, which is most of our bases, but I thought I'd include it in the video just quickly, because, you know, the black sands of Istvan 5, you know, it's a phrase that really stuck with me ever since I first sort of read it. So I thought I'd just go on how I did it. So I've used a texture paste here. The colour really doesn't matter. This is Dry Ground by AK, but it's a nice kind of sort of light neutral, fairly neutral colour, which I like to use very often. I like the texture of it, but I also like the fact that I can then paint over the top of it and make it whatever colour I want it to be. It also acts as an adhesive. So I've got a little tub here of crushed up rock fossil, actually, just to give me lots of nice different natural sort of tones and shapes and sizes. I need to make some more of that. and then sprinkle all that sort of over on there to get the textures I like. I say basing is something I'm going to be focusing on a lot more over the next year, and I'm thinking, well, I hope you guys fancy a proper bad ab project, so I thought that would give us the opportunity for some more digging into basing. And then for colours, I just used whatever I had on my palette, so I used the greys, the browns and the black that I had on my palette, just mushed them together, washed them down with water and just washed that over the surface. And then I took 3 pigments, a dark brown, a natural sienna colour, or a light sienna colour really, and black, to create that sort of dusty surface. You know, although it's the black sands, I still wanted there to be lots of colour in there still. I think this is a very, very boring, simple looking scheme, but I love how much colour is in it. I don't know if that's apparent on the model, but it certainly is to me as I'm doing it. I find it really, really satisfying to look at. Like, this model's like right up my street. So just smushing all of that pigment in there, working it right into all that texture, and it'd be absolutely fine to game with. You might lose a tiny bit of it on the first 1 or 2 times you use the model, but after that, everything's so sort of smushed down in there that you don't need to be using fixatives or anything like that if you don't want to. Absolutely, you could, but it will change the look ever so slightly when you use those fixatives. So it just depends on what you're going for. And for me, that dusty sand, I wanted it to be kind of these pure pigments for it. That's my take on an Iron Hands Praetor in Saturnine Terminator armour. Really, really pleased with this model. He's going straight in a cabinet. I'm going to really enjoy having him on the shelf with the other Heresy stuff. As I said at the top of the video, and if you're still with me, thank you. It's amazing. It's another whopper. I don't know what's going on at the minute with these videos. I hope you don't mind them being the length they are. In fact, if you are still here, bang that like button, because you must have enjoyed something. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of fun. A lot of fun, this me. And at the top of the video, as I say, I wanted it simple and brutal, and I think I've achieved that. I had a lot of fun painting him. I had a lot of fun in the process, whilst there wasn't much on him that was really new for me, except maybe the odd metallic colour I was using. You know, it was kind of falling back on recipes and techniques that I was really familiar with and I enjoyed, but it did mean that the whole process was just really relaxing and really fun. I also think eminently doable across an army. Like, I don't feel like this is anywhere near a sort of display level at all. This is perfectly viable for army painting. And yes, it's simple, easy to repeat, easy to replicate. The nice thing about that sort of oily black look on the armour is that it doesn't have to look exactly the same on everything you do. I would do the vehicles exactly the same way. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Will I do another Iron Hands? I don't know. This might be the last Iron Hands model I ever paint, and if it is, I'm really content, really happy with it. And it's my favourite one that I've done. I thought Shadrach would always be my favourite one, but this guy, yeah, it's tick the boxes. And as a very old fan of the Heresy, I'm really pleased I got to do him for the launch edition again. It was great fun doing something for last edition, and super cool doing one for this edition as well. I took a couple of shots of him next to a few other miniatures as well, just so you guys can get an idea of the size of him. Because yeah, he is just absolutely just gigantic. It's ridiculous. It really is. Yeah. What a cool centerpiece model to have, and what a lovely sort of variety of sizes and silhouettes we can get now in our marine armies. And speaking of marine armies, I am loving doing Cathay. I'm loving my old world, but I have been wanting to do a marine project for a long time now, and after a lot of umming and ahhing, I think I would like to do something pretty significant for Badab. So I'm going to talk to you about that in some videos coming up very, very soon. But let me know down in the comments if you fancy seeing a bit more of a deep dive into the Badab Wars, utilising a lot of these Heresy miniatures. Obviously, I will be doing some more Heresy content over the next month or two. There's a few schemes I really fancy having a go at. So yeah, let me know as well. There's definitely room in there if you've got some suggestions. I can take a look at doing. But as ever, if there's anything in the video that you've got questions about, pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.